Welcome back, coin hunters and coin collectors. Today we are focusing on Canadian 10-cent coins, a denomination with a fascinating history stretching back through multiple generations of Canadian coinage. Some examples are common and have little premium beyond face value, while scarce dates, varieties, exceptional condition pieces, and important errors can attract serious attention. Throughout this video, remember that coin values are not guaranteed simply because a coin is old. The kinds of prices examples can bring in the modern market. So before you spend or discard any old Canadian 10-cent coin, take a close look at it, because the smallest details can sometimes make the biggest difference. Actual prices depend heavily on authenticity, rarity, grade, eye appeal, demand, and the results of comparable sales. With that important point in mind, let's explore 4 Canadian 10-cent coins that deserve a place on every collector's watch list. So let's get started. First up, we are taking a close look at the legendary 2004 Canadian 10-cent coin, a coin that millions of people have probably handled without giving it a second thought. But before you throw one into a jar or spend it, there are several details you should understand. We are going to examine its history, design, composition, condition, rarity, and realistic market value in today's collecting market. The Canadian 10-cent coin has a long history, and the 2004 issue belongs to the modern era of Canadian circulation coins. The Royal Canadian Mint records a very large production for the 2004 10-cent denomination, with more than 213 million coins listed for that year in its circulation records, while Government of Canada Mint statistics report 214,143,000 plated 10-cent pieces for 2004. That immediately tells us something important. The normal 2004 10-cent coin is not considered an extremely scarce date simply because it is from 2004. Its potential interest comes from identifying the exact type, unusual errors or varieties, and especially the condition. The design is one of the most recognizable features of this Canadian dime. On the front, or obverse, you will see the uncrowned portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Around the portrait is the inscription Elizabeth Regina. The portrait was designed by Susanna Blunt. On the reverse is the famous Canadian schooner Bluenose, shown sailing with its tall sails raised. Around this side you will see Canada, 2004 and 10 cents. The reverse design is associated with Emmanuel Hahn and has been one of the defining designs of Canadian 10-cent coins for generations. Now take a close look at the physical characteristics. The standard 2004 circulation coin weighs approximately 1.75 grams, measures about 18.03 millimeters in diameter, is approximately 1.22 millimeters thick, and has a reeded edge. It is also magnetic. Most importantly, the regular circulation version is made from copper-plated steel, with the composition listed as approximately 92% steel, 5.5% copper, and 2.5% nickel. This is very important when examining an old coin because a heavily worn example can lose much of its original surface appearance, and damage or environmental exposure can make the coin look dramatically different from a fresh example. And now we come to the part many collectors are interested in, the condition. If your 2004 Canadian 10-cent coin is heavily circulated, scratched, dirty, dark, or badly worn, don't automatically assume that it is a valuable rarity. In fact, current price guides show that ordinary circulated 2004 examples generally remain close to their face value. Coins and Canada currently lists the circulated business strike example at around 10 cents, while higher uncirculated grades can command substantially more. So if your coin is extremely ugly and heavily circulated, its condition by itself does not create a huge premium. However, this does not mean you should ignore it. A circulated coin can still become interesting if you discover something unusual. Look carefully at the date, the lettering, the portrait, the Bluenose design, the rim, and the edge. Search for obvious minting abnormalities such as major doubling, an unusual strike, missing design details caused by a genuine minting problem, dramatic off-centering, cracks, clips, or other abnormalities. But remember that scratches, dents, discoloration, corrosion, and damage caused after the coin left the mint are not automatically valuable mint errors. There is another fascinating possibility connected with the 2004 Canadian 10-cent denomination. The Royal Canadian Mint also produced collector versions, including silver-proof pieces. A 2004 silver version is listed as sterling silver, with 92.5% silver and 7.5% copper, weighing approximately 2.32 grams, and it was produced as a proof issue rather than an ordinary circulation coin. That means collectors should not confuse a normal dirty circulation coin with a specially produced silver collector issue. The standard circulation piece is copper-plated steel and magnetic, while the silver-proof version is non-magnetic and has a completely different composition. So what is the current market value? For a normal 2004 Canadian 10-cent coin in heavily circulated and ugly condition, you should generally think in terms of its 10-cent face value, rather than expecting hundreds or thousands of dollars. Current published guides show that certified or high-grade examples can rise above face value, with one current guide listing approximately 50 cents at MS60, 65 cents at MS62, 80 cents at MS63, $7.80 at MS64, $17.40 at MS65, $31.90 at MS66, and $84.30 at MS67. These figures demonstrate how dramatically condition can change collector interest. A coin that has spent years circulating is completely different from a sharply struck, nearly flawless example. So if you have a dirty 2004 dime, don't clean it aggressively. This is one of the most important tips for collectors. Cleaning can create scratches and unnatural surfaces that may reduce collector appeal. Instead, handle the coin carefully by its edges, inspect it under good lighting, and compare both sides. Check whether it is magnetic, examine the weight if you have an accurate digital scale, and look closely for genuine minting abnormalities. If you believe you have an exceptional error or an unusually high-grade specimen, consider getting professional authentication before spending money on an expensive certification. The biggest lesson here is simple. Don't judge a coin only by how old, dirty, or ugly it looks. But at the same time, don't assume every ordinary modern coin is a hidden fortune. The 2004 Canadian 10-cent piece had a large circulation mintage, so a heavily circulated example normally has little premium above face value. The real opportunity is in finding an unusual variety, a dramatic genuine mint error, or an exceptionally well-preserved example. So the next time you find a Canadian 10-cent coin dated 2004, stop for a moment and inspect it. Look at the Queen Elizabeth II portrait, study the blue nose, check the date and lettering, examine the edge, and pay attention to anything that looks genuinely different from a normal coin. Your dirty old dime may not automatically be a jackpot, but careful examination is exactly how collectors learn to separate ordinary coins from the pieces that deserve a second look. Next up, we are taking a close look at the legendary 1987 Canadian 10-cent coin, especially examples found in circulated condition. This coin may look completely ordinary, but understanding its history, design, condition, and collector market can help you recognize the difference between a common example and a coin that deserves closer attention. So before you spend or toss aside that old Canadian dime, we are going to examine exactly what makes the 1987 10-cent interesting to collectors and what its realistic market value can be today. The legendary 1987 Canadian 10-cent was produced by the Royal Canadian Mint during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. It belongs to the modern Canadian 10-cent series featuring the famous Bluenose sailing ship. According to the Royal Canadian Mint, 147,309,000 examples were produced for circulation in 1987. That is a substantial mintage, so the standard circulated 1987 dime should not automatically be considered an extremely rare coin. However, mintage alone does not tell the entire story of a coin's collectible appeal. Collectors also examine condition, unusual characteristics, errors, varieties, and exceptionally well-preserved examples. Now let's examine the coin itself. On the obverse, you will see the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II facing right. Around the portrait is the inscription Elizabethiidg Regina, while the date appears on the coin as part of the overall design. The portrait was designed by Arnold Machin, and this version of the Canadian 10-cent belongs to the smaller young portrait era used during this period. Flip the coin over, and you will see one of Canada's most recognizable nautical images, the Bluenose, a famous schooner sailing across the sea. The reverse design was created by Emmanuel Hahn, and the words Canada and 10 cents, along with the year 1987, identify the denomination and date. One of the most interesting things about this coin is its physical construction. The 1987 Canadian 10-cent is made from nickel rather than precious silver. It weighs approximately 2.07 grams, measures about 18.03 millimeters in diameter, and has a thickness of roughly 1.16 millimeters. The edge is reeded, meaning you can feel a series of small grooves around the outside of the coin. The coin is also magnetic, which is another useful characteristic when identifying the standard 1987 issue. But here is where condition becomes extremely important. A circulated 1987 Canadian 10-cent will normally show evidence of everyday use. You may see scratches, small contact marks, flattened details, dull surfaces, or wear on Queen Elizabeth II's portrait and the Bluenose. These characteristics are completely normal for a coin that spent years moving through circulation. Current price guide information lists ordinary circulated examples around 10 to 15 Canadian cents, depending on the grade, with the strongest circulated grades bringing the higher end of that range. In other words, an ordinary circulated 1987 dime is generally not a major jackpot coin. However, don't stop looking just because your coin is circulated. The real excitement comes when you discover something unusual. Collectors should carefully inspect the date, lettering, portrait, ship, rim, and edge for abnormalities. Look for unusual doubling, striking problems, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, missing or distorted details, or other mint-made errors. A genuine mint error can sometimes make an otherwise common date coin considerably more interesting to collectors. But remember, damage that happened after the coin left the mint is not the same thing as a mint error. Scratches, dents, chemical discoloration, polishing, or intentional alterations generally do not create the same collector premium. Market becomes much more interesting as the condition improves. Coins in Canada currently lists the 1987 10-cent at approximately 50 cents in MS60, 75 cents in MS62, $1.05 in MS63, $9.40 in MS64, $27.20 in MS65, and $82.60 in MS66, with values stated in Canadian dollars. These figures demonstrate an important lesson for collectors. While the typical circulated example is close to face value, an exceptionally preserved example can be worth dramatically more because high-grade survivors are much harder to find. So what about the 1987 Canadian 10-cent in circulated condition that you might actually find in an old collection, jar, drawer, or box of coins? Realistically, most ordinary circulated pieces are worth around their face value, with published guide values generally around 10 cents to 15 cents for the circulated grades shown. That means you should not expect every 1987 dime to be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The opportunity is in identifying an unusual example, a high-grade coin that was somehow protected from circulation, or a genuine mint error or recognized variety. And this is exactly why coin collecting can be so exciting. Two coins with the same date and denomination can have completely different collector appeal depending on their condition and characteristics. One 1987 dime may have been heavily circulated for decades, while another may have escaped into a collection almost immediately after production. The difference in preservation can create a major difference in collector interest and price. If you have a 1987 Canadian 10-cent coin, my first tip is simple: do not clean it. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and may reduce collector appeal. Instead, hold the coin by its edges and examine it under good lighting. Use a magnifying glass if necessary and compare the details of the Queen's portrait, the lettering, the date, the Bluenose, and the rim. If you believe you have a significant mint error or an exceptionally high-grade example, consider getting it examined by a reputable Canadian coin dealer or professional grading service. Another important tip is to separate realistic market values from sensational asking prices online. A seller can list a coin for an enormous amount, but that does not mean somebody actually paid that amount. For a meaningful valuation, look for documented sales, recognized price guides, and professional assessments. The available 1987 Canadian 10-cent data shows that the ordinary circulated coin is common, while truly high-grade examples can command substantially higher guide values. So the next time you see a 1987 Canadian 10-cent coin, don't automatically assume it is worthless just because it looks old or ordinary. The standard circulated example is generally a low-value coin, but its design, history, condition, and any genuine mint-made abnormalities can make it worth investigating. With 147.3 million circulation pieces struck, this is not a rare date by mintage alone, but exceptional condition and genuine errors are exactly the kinds of factors that can separate an ordinary dime from a collector-worthy discovery. And that is the biggest lesson from today's coin. Always check before you spend. Look carefully at the date, inspect the details, study the condition, and never assume an old coin is either automatically valuable or automatically worthless. Your 1987 Canadian 10-cent may simply be worth 10 cents, but if you discover an unusual error or an exceptionally preserved example, that's when the story can become much more interesting. If you enjoyed this coin hunt, make sure you subscribe for more Canadian, American, British, and world coin discoveries, because the next valuable coin could already be sitting inside your collection. Check your change, check your old jars, and most importantly, know what you have before you let it go. Next up, if you have an ugly, dirty 1983 Canadian 10-cent coin, don't throw it away just because it looks worn or unattractive. We're taking a close look at this Canadian dime, its history, design, metal composition, rarity, condition, and most importantly, what a 1983 example may actually be worth in the collector market. And stay until the end, because even though the ordinary circulated examples are generally modest in value, a much higher grade example can attract significantly more collector interest. The Canadian 10-cent coin has a fascinating history, and the 1983 issue belongs to an important period of modern Canadian coinage. The coin was produced for everyday circulation during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, and the Royal Canadian Mint reports more than 111 million 1983 10-cent pieces struck for circulation. That means the date itself is not considered an extreme rarity, but surviving condition, eye appeal, and unusual characteristics can make individual examples much more interesting to collectors. Now let's examine the coin itself. On the front, or obverse, you will see the young portrait of Queen Elizabeth II facing right. Around the portrait are the inscriptions Elizabeth IIDG Regina, while the date appears as 1983. The portrait was designed by Arnold Machin and was used on Canadian coins during this era. The opposite side features one of Canada's most famous coin designs, the Bluenose schooner, sailing across the water with its tall sails clearly visible. The reverse includes the word Canada, the denomination 10 cents, and the date 1983. The Bluenose design was created by Emmanuel Hahn and has become one of the most recognizable images in Canadian numismatics. The physical specifications are also important when identifying an authentic 1983 Canadian dime. This coin is made of nickel, weighs approximately 2.07 grams, measures about 18.03 millimeters in diameter, and has a thickness of approximately 1.16 millimeters. It is also magnetic because of its nickel composition. The edge is reeded, meaning you should see a series of small grooves around the edge rather than a completely smooth surface. These measurements can be extremely useful if you suspect that your coin might be an unusual error or an altered piece. How rare is a dirty 1983 Canadian 10-cent coin? The first thing to understand is that an ugly appearance does not automatically mean a coin is rare. In fact, ordinary circulated 1983 dimes are fairly common because more than 111 million were produced. However, collectors examine individual coins for condition, unusual errors, striking characteristics, varieties, and exceptional preservation. A coin that has spent decades in circulation may show scratches, dark tunning, dirt, rim marks, and significant wear. That usually places it toward the lower end of the collectible market. Current published price information gives us a useful picture. Coins and Canada lists ordinary circulated 1983 examples at very modest values, with higher circulated grades reaching only small premiums, while its published estimates for mint state examples rise considerably as condition improves. In Canadian dollars, its listed values range from around 10 cents for lower circulated examples to approximately $33.10 at MS65 and $84.80 at MS66 in the cited guide. Another version of the same guide expressed in US dollars lists approximately 5 cents to 10 cents for circulated examples, about 35 cents at MS60, 80 cents at MS63, $6.90 at MS64, $23.40 at MS65, and $59.90 at MS66. These are guide values rather than guarantees of what every coin will sell for, and actual auction prices can vary. This is where condition becomes absolutely critical. Imagine two 1983 Canadian dimes sitting next to each other. One is dirty, scratched, heavily circulated, and has lost much of its original detail. The other is bright, sharply struck, and has almost no evidence of circulation. They may have exactly the same date and basic design, but collectors can value them very differently. Professional grading becomes especially important at the higher end because certified coins allow buyers to compare condition more confidently. PCGS population information also shows that certified 1983 Canadian 10-cent examples exist in relatively small numbers at high grades, illustrating why exceptional preservation can attract attention even when the original mintage was large. So if your 1983 dime is extremely dirty, what should you do? Do not aggressively clean it. Scrubbing, polishing, chemicals, or abrasive materials can leave permanent hairlines and damage the original surface. A coin that looks unattractive to the average person may actually be more desirable to a collector if its original surface has been preserved. Instead, handle the coin carefully by its edges, examine both sides under good lighting, check the date, inspect the lettering, study the blue nose design, and look closely for anything unusual. You should also check the edge and compare the coin's weight and diameter with the standard specifications. If you discover something that looks like a genuine mint error, avoid cleaning or altering the coin and consider getting an expert opinion. Remember that internet listings sometimes advertise ordinary coins for enormous amounts, but an asking price is not the same thing as a confirmed sale. Real collector value depends on condition, authenticity, demand, and documented market evidence. And here is the biggest takeaway from this 1983 Canadian 10-cent coin. Being dirty does not make it automatically valuable, and being common does not mean it is completely uninteresting. The normal circulated 1983 dime generally remains a low-value coin, but high-grade examples can command much stronger premiums, particularly when they have excellent surfaces and preservation. With more than 111 million circulation pieces produced, the real opportunity is not simply finding the date. It is finding an unusually well-preserved example or a legitimate mint error that stands apart from the ordinary coins. So before you spend, discard, or clean an old Canadian dime, take a second look. Check the 1983 date, Queen Elizabeth II portrait, blue nose reverse, lettering, edge, weight, and overall condition. Your dirty coin may be a fortune, but discovering a remarkably preserved example or a genuine mint error could make your find much more interesting to collectors. Next up, finding a Canadian 10-cent coin in your old change that looks completely ordinary, only to discover that it carries a P-mint mark and comes from 2004. Could this small coin actually be worth serious money, we are taking a close look at the 2004 Canadian 10-cent coin with the P Mint mark, its history, design, composition, rarity, condition, and what collectors may actually pay for it today. So before you spend or discard one, watch until the end and learn exactly what makes this coin interesting. The Canadian 10-cent coin has a long history, and the 2004 issue belongs to the modern Elizabeth II era. The coin was produced by the Royal Canadian Mint, and the 2004 P variety had a reported circulation mintage of about 214,143,000 pieces. That number is important because it tells us that the regular circulated coin is not considered extremely scarce simply because it is from 2004. However, collectors can still become interested in examples with exceptional preservation, unusual characteristics, or recognized varieties and eras. Now let's look closely at the coin itself. On the obverse is the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, facing right, surrounded by the inscription Elizabeth Regina. The reverse features the famous Canadian schooner Bluenose, shown sailing with its tall sails across the water. Around the design are the words Canada, 10 cents, and the year 2004. The Bluenose design is one of the most recognizable images in Canadian coinage and was created by Emmanuel Hahn. One of the most interesting things collectors may notice is the P Mint mark. The P identifies the plated composition used for this modern Canadian coinage and is associated with Royal Canadian Mint production. If you have a 2004 10-cent coin, carefully inspect the area around the design and lettering to confirm that you are looking at the correct variety. Do not assume that every 2004 10-cent coin is rare simply because it has a P. The date, variety, condition, and any genuine mint era all have to be considered together. The physical specifications are also quite distinctive. The 2004 P 10-cent coin is made from copper-plated steel, with a reported composition of approximately 92% steel, 5.5% copper, and 2.5% nickel. It weighs about 1.75 grams, measures approximately 18.03 millimeters in diameter, and is about 1.22 millimeters thick. It has a reeded edge and is magnetic because of its steel core. Now comes the most important question. What is a 2004 Canadian 10-cent P coin actually worth today? This is where collectors need to separate realistic market values from sensational claims. Current published price guides show that an ordinary circulated example generally remains close to face value. Coins in Canada currently lists the 2004 P issue at about 10 Canadian cents in AU50, while higher mint state grades can rise substantially. Its guide gives approximately 50 cents CAD in MS60, 80 cents in MS63, $7.80 in MS64, $17.40 in MS65, $31.90 in MS66, and up to about $84.30 in MS67. These are guide values and not guaranteed sale prices. In US dollar terms, the exact amount changes with the exchange rate, but the important point is that a normal very good or circulated 2004 P 10-cent coin is generally not a high dollar rarity. Numismatics indicative data likewise places ordinary examples at modest values, while better preserved pieces can command more. The real opportunity for collectors is finding an unusually high-grade example, a legitimate mint era, or another recognized variety that separates the coin from the enormous number of ordinary pieces produced. Condition is absolutely critical. A coin described as very good or VG will show substantial circulation wear. Important design details may be softened, and the surfaces may contain scratches, marks, discoloration, or other evidence of use. Such a coin normally does not carry the kind of premium associated with top mint state examples. But if your 2004 P 10-cent coin is unusually sharp, clean, lustrous, and nearly untouched, it becomes much more interesting. Collectors pay increasing attention as coins move into higher grades, which is why professional grading can sometimes matter for exceptional examples. There is another important point to remember. Do not clean the coin. If you find an old Canadian 10-cent piece, resist the temptation to polish it, scrub it, or use chemicals to make it shine. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and may reduce collector appeal. Instead, handle the coin carefully by its edges and store it in a proper non-reactive holder. You should also inspect the coin under good lighting for possible abnormalities. Look for unusual doubling, missing or distorted design elements, major die cracks, striking problems, off-center strikes, unusual planchets, or other characteristics that appear genuinely different from normal production. However, many marks that look exciting to the naked eye are simply damage caused after the coin left the mint. If you believe you have a major error, compare it with authenticated examples or have it examined by a reputable professional rather than assuming it is valuable. So if you discover a 2004 Canadian 10-cent coin with a P mint mark in very good condition, should you keep it? Absolutely. If you enjoy collecting Canadian coins, just keep expectations realistic. The ordinary circulated example is generally a common modern coin, while exceptional mint state specimens can be worth considerably more. Current guides show that the value can move from around face value for circulated pieces to $10,000 and potentially around $84,000 CAD in MS-67, depending on grade and market demand. The biggest lesson is simple: never judge a coin only by its face value or its age. Examine the date, mint mark, design details, condition, and possible errors before deciding what you have. A 10-cent coin may not automatically be a fortune, but a particularly high-grade or unusual example can attract serious attention from collectors. So check your jars, old coin boxes, inherited collections, and Canadian change. If you find a 2004 10-cent coin, take a close look before spending it. And remember, the difference between an ordinary coin and a collectible coin can sometimes be hidden in tiny details that most people never notice. If you enjoyed this 5-minute coin hunt, make sure you keep checking your Canadian change, because valuable coins are often hiding in the most unexpected places. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for more Canadian coins, rare varieties, mint errors, and valuable coins that could be worth far more than their face value.